Africa is in studio today. We also are joined by Ben Sitluano, who's the president of the National Mining Council, on Skype. We're also joined by Ditshwano Kganakgomo, who's also joining us via Skype. Firstly, Mr. Rutledge, welcome to ANN7.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, this story sounds all too familiar, I think, where we have communities excluded. There's a big mine coming into town, but somehow they cannot find what they will benefit from this very mine. Is this the case?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head, that this is not, unfortunately, a unique situation. We find that this is quite common in the industry. Most latest example is in Kolobeni, where the community there also refused to have the mine there. But they continue to have consultations 50 kilometers away from the area that they were mining, use different means to divide the community, including supporting certain factions in the community or certain tribal chiefs opposed to other chiefs. And so they tend to use this as an opportunity to create division in the community. So it's not new. And it is a practice which we see across the world, not only in South Africa. So this is quite common. And De Beers, being an international company, are probably well experienced in how to get their way when they're dealing with an impoverished community who are far from the access to resources, and really who they bank on not having knowledge of the mining laws and legislation. So we are glad to see that the community are at least aware of some of the issues that are required. In fact, their list of demands are quite accurate. And so all of those things which they are demanding are absolutely legitimate demands. And it is unacceptable that the company has not consulted with the community. And the argument that it's non-invasive and will have no impact on the community is it's just not acceptable.
Now let's quickly rope in Ben. Ben, you're from the National Mining Council. Just for context, for the benefit of those who might not be aware, take us through the legal process that should be followed by an entity seeking those prospecting rights. Ben, can you at least hear us? Ben? Just for context, for the benefit of those who might not be aware, can you just take us through the legal process that a company or an entity has to follow if they're seeking those prospecting rights? We seem to have lost Ben there. Ditshwano, can you just tell us perhaps from your understanding, now you are representing the tribal authority, at least as the community, what are some of the grievances?
Issue pertaining to license is complicated. You'll recall the old system. It was a physical application. Now the Department of Minerals, they have introduced the new system of which you can apply online. Now, when you apply online, you are going to create similar problems that are created similar to the one which De Beers has applied currently. Because the online application, you can apply even you are in London, you can apply for any mining in South Africa, because as long as you've got your coordinates, you can apply whoever you are. Now, the issue that we have to fight with the minister is that this online thing is disadvantaging our communities, because communities, since this online thing was being introduced, they are no more going back to the community. They are just going to the department and then they are doing their online job. And they have nothing to do with the community. Then that it is for that reason the community, they've got to demonstrate their rights, so that we must do away with online, because every mining company in South Africa, they must register physically on the department. And then if they require for consultation, they must go to that particular people who residing in that area where they need to mine. You can't mine in the area of the people without having a proper consultation and not having the tribal resolution. You must have the law says you must have a resolution.
Now, Edwin, perhaps this one is for you. Is there any merit to that argument, at least of those grievances, that there's an issue if you're going to be applying online, you can be anywhere in the country, and to a certain extent, does it really disadvantage that specific community?
Come again, ma'am?
This question that at least he poses, or the grievance that he poses, that the part where they get to apply online disadvantages the community and is something that they raise with the DMR. Is there any merit to that issue that they have where people can apply anywhere in the world?
I think that it will be disadvantage to the community that will be affected on that regard. So, like, as the community of Siki, we have raised our issues with the bears regarding this prospecting right. But what concerns us, it was their response to the bears that they were, due to time constraint, they will consult the community if maybe DMR grant or accept the application for prospecting right. So our concern is that we as the resident of Siki, the prospecting right is going to take place in our area. But how come we were not involved from the onset? Because the community have to be involved from the onset, regardless of how small the prospecting is going to be. As Nema stated that the community have to be consulted thoroughly and engage when there's the time to do the BAR, Basic Assessment Report, the EMPR, Environmental Management Plan Report. The community must be involved on that regard. So if they shut the community out of this whole situation, it will be affecting the community badly on that regard, ma'am.
Now, Dithuano, at least for you as part of the tribal authority, were you now perhaps communicating with this mine on the community's behalf? Because now here they're speaking about having not been consulted from the onset. I mean, they had a meeting or a consultation that was 20 kilometers from where they stay. We all know that this is an impoverished community. So half the time they wouldn't be able to even travel 20 kilometers outside of where they are. Question to you as the tribal authority, as we've just spoken to Edwin there, is that as the tribal authority, were you speaking or at least consulting on the community's behalf? Because here they are actually at pains to say they needed to be part of that consultation, and you guys having had a meeting 20 kilometers outside of where they are was actually in essence excluding them because they cannot afford to be traveling outside of their area. Christopher, you could answer this. I mean, what he's talking about as a community, that here they were excluded. At times we have tribal authorities, we have chiefs speaking on the community's behalf. They are proxies for the community. But is that enough? Can they be the ones that are part of the consultations and not the community members themselves?
Look, we have found that that doesn't work. What it does do is create conflict in the community. So the chief then gets labeled as the person who has all the funds. The chief becomes rich, and soon you'll see the chief driving a 4x4 and a new house. And so the chief will continue to get rich, and the community will continue to stay where they are. In fact, in some cases, they become poorer. And so that for us is a recipe for conflict in society and in that community specifically. So we think that that's a very unhealthy practice, but it's a common practice. It is something which unfortunately is not very clear in the law. So the law says that you have to consult with the community, but it doesn't mean that you have to take into consideration what they say, or that the community has any kind of final say on whether that mine happens, how it happens, who gets involved, what are the benefits, and so on. So that's for us a bit of a problem in the legislation at the moment. The mining charter does tend to try and fix some of the problems in terms of allocating a certain share to the community and making sure that there is some community shareholding. But again, the limitation of that is that the charter does not actually place that shareholding in the hands of the community. So the community are really just bystanders. They can only just watch as these things unfold. And so that share ownership is then controlled by the minister through a committee that he puts in place. And there's not very clear ideas to how the community actually gets involved. So we think this is part of a broader problem in our society that has got to be fixed eventually.
Mm-hmm. Now, Lebang, just to throw one question at you. What exactly were your expectations as the community?
We, as the community of Seeking, we were actually expecting DBS to do things accordingly. To firstly consult us and from the onset do things according to the law of South Africa. It was not done properly. The people of Seeking have got livestock that is kept in the area, so they have to be consulted. We are not saying we don't want mining in Seeking. We are actually saying let's just do things according to the law of South Africa, according to the regulations and the law.
Mm-hmm. Now, has this created some sort of divisions between perhaps you and traditional authorities at this point, where the community is on one side and traditional authorities seem to be continuing with this entity? De Beers?
Yes, it has caused a confusion because now we are struggling to communicate with the chief. We even lodged a complaint in DMR for them to intervene on this matter.
Mm-hmm. Now, Christopher, just to come back to you, you touched on the mining charter. Now, here, I just want to still find out, at least pick your brain on the once empowered, always empowered. Can we continue to operate in that manner?
No, I think the once empowered, always empowered doctrine is a farce. I mean, it's nonsensical. The fact of the matter is that we are dealing with a historical injustice. Our constitution is very clear that ours is not a normal constitution. Ours is a constitution that looks to address the question of historical injustices. So one cannot say that you have now addressed it and let's move on. So that question of once empowered, always empowered is not useful, it's not helpful, and it's a very narrow way of looking at the problems that face South Africa. So we think that it's a silly debate, to say the least. Our focus must be on a mine like De Beers, a new operation that goes into a community. Their obligation is to work with that community to uplift them. That is the historical injunction that our constitution places upon that business. Mm-hmm. So the mining charter is trying to help business to get to that point where they realize that they are not entities who operate in a vacuum, that they are part of the South African society, that they're extracting minerals that belong to South African society, and that the wealth of that minerals must be shared with the people who live in that area and the people of the society. Mm-hmm. So it is flabbergasting that we have to, 23 years after democracy, still be having this conversation with big business like De Beers, who we know have moved out billions of rands out of South Africa, who have over the years become stinking rich from the mineral wealth of this country. And yet here we are with a community who is quite obviously faced with great poverty. They have the opportunity there to have a new lease on life, to enjoy the fruits of the mineral wealth, and yet this company has got no qualms about excluding them, about continuing old colonial and apartheid practices, and that's, quite frankly, is more than disappointing. It's disgusting. We should stop this. It should not continue. South Africa's had enough of this kind of behavior.
Christopher is saying it's disgusting. Ben, as the president of the National Mining Council, we hear this all the time. You go to a mining indaba and you'd have mine owners saying that Unfortunately, a mine is not a social project. It is a business essentially. But here we're hearing that it is discussing. What is your take on that? Do you acknowledge your responsibilities as a mine to that very community?
Yes, we do. One other issue that we want to push forward is that we have 63 cases in our hands. Communities, they've been complaining. It's not only the Siki people who have similar issues of non-compliance. We've got so many cases of non-compliance, and the mine is not only a business who must benefit, who the people who actually are miners. It has to benefit broadly, because we've got people who are seeking for jobs. We've got business that are taking place. There are cleaning companies need to have jobs there. There are so many companies. We engage with a lot of communities to engage with the minister to come up with a comprehensive an ideal of going forward. But the issue that I want to tell is that the South Africa is not the similar South Africa where was created by 1994 by the President Nelson Mandela. Everyone is looking for his pocket, and then they are utilizing every person who have powers within the communities and so on, irrespective of their positions as councillors, as chiefs, and so on. And we are aware of how much are they getting by selling our people. But we're going to come strong. I want to make an example about here in Ditjobota. There is a lot of cement companies that are not in compliance. We also engage with the Office of the Minister. People stayed 3 weeks in Budibe village at the railway lines there. They camp there. The mine interdicted them. We're gonna fight. We're gonna fight. We are not going to leave any stone unturned. We're gonna fight. We're gonna take a lot of many cases to court, including this case of DBS. We are busy consulting with advocates in Pretoria for 63 cases that we have. We're gonna take these mining houses in order as we are preparing to this in Daba. And then the fortunate part is that the advocate that is representing us is familiar to these mining companies and on which how they operate, and then we're going to deal with them. We're going to make sure that at the end of the day, communities are going to be the beneficiaries in terms of the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act of 2002, and then as well as the mining charter, the old and the new one. We are watching. We are watching very close, and we're gonna work very hard to make sure that there will be no space in between the community and the mine. We're gonna tighten up the space. We're gonna make sure that they're gonna feel the heat now.
Mm-hmm. Lebang, perhaps those are some comforting words coming from the council that these big mining companies will feel the heat. But perhaps can you break down, in those protesting within your community, are you just looking to be part of the labor force, where you're looking to be employed, or also SMMEs are there, where some of you are looking to do business with the mine?
Yes, there are SMMEs in Sikhi, but they are disadvantaged because now with the tribal they've got to get tribal resolutions to in order to develop themselves as entrepreneurs. And NYDA has trained 35 of the youth in Sikhi in order to empower them so that when businesses like this, when big companies like DBS come, they can maybe subcontract on those companies, and then the challenge that we have as the youth in Sikhi, hence you see this issue raising our eyebrows, is we cannot get resolutions as one of those things that that enables us to grow as SMMEs in Sikeng.
Now, Christopher, with such instances, really, did it have to get to this point with De Beers where community now takes to the street, or it could have been resolved amicably where they didn't even have to take to the streets?
Yes, now I think that's often the case with people living in poverty, people on the margins of society. Those in power quite often feel that they are easy targets, that they are uneducated, so they don't know what's happening. They have no access to lawyers or other resources, so we can just ride roughshod over the legal aspects of it. And so quite often the only recourse that people have is to protest. And then that, I think, South Africa is one of the countries that has the highest rate of protest per capita. And that's a sad state of affairs, that people have to resort to protest in order to be heard. And so we think that that's certainly something that plagues our country. One, that I think our politicians don't listen to people very well, and business often don't listen to people either, because they can get away with these things. The law as it stands is not going to be prejudicial to the beers, so they're going to be able to navigate their way around this challenge, and quite frankly there will be no consequences for them. This is just another a pothole in the road, and that's the sad part. But for this community it's everything, and so the disparity of power and resources is just a huge problem in South Africa.
Now, Gladwin, for you at least, when you hear that this is perhaps just another pothole for De Beers mine, what do you make of this? Will this protest perhaps be taken further beyond this?
Ma'am, I know that capital monopoly have made people heartless. My concern is that it seems that our traditional council are in cahoots with De Beers, because we have tried by all means to engage them on these matters going forward. But it seems that De Beers have a memorandum of understanding with the traditional council, and it seems that they have already have the go ahead to apply for that prospecting right. But as the community, because we will be the affected ones, and we are the rightful landowners of Sikeng, we will fight tooth and nails regardless of this, of maybe it will be important to De Beers. Sikeng, it is our home, this is our land, and we are not going to give up so easily. We know that capital monopoly play a huge role in South Africa, and we are aware of everything that when it comes to mining, there's a lot of things. There's killings, there's corruption, you can name it, ma'am. But as for the community, hence the strike, we say that forward we go.
No, I hear you. Christopher, just in closing, in government's pursuit for radical economic transformation, there's always this tough balancing act. They want to appease big business because we need investment in these various communities. But at the same time, government has to look out for the ordinary man, the community members. So that balancing act, can government ever get it right, where they need both of these people?
Look, let me say something that might be a bit controversial, but let me say it nonetheless, that yes, there is a balance to be struck. And the question that we have to constantly ask ourselves is, when our government acts in the interest of big business only, against the interest of ordinary people living in poverty, then we have crossed a very important line, because then government is not a government of the people anymore. So you have to strike a balance. Government is there to represent the interest of the whole society. So none more so than those who are living in poverty, who are on the margins of society and don't have access to lawyers and so forth. So there's an absolute obligation to maintain the interest of the whole society. So in our mining laws, the fact of the matter is that big business, the big corporations, they basically dominate the legislation. I was in Parliament not so long ago, And the Chamber of Mines supported the MPRDA amendments completely because they know that they were the ones who actually almost drafted that legislation. It is in their interest, not in the interest of that community or any other community in South Africa. So the fact of the matter is, mining legislation in South Africa is generally still in favor of big corporations. It's still a colonial model of accumulation. And until that changes, we are not going to see the end of these protests. And these protests are not isolated. They are part of a daily occurrence in South Africa.
No, it's honestly disheartening, especially for the communities, as you say. But Chris, thank you very much. And to our other guests on Skype, thank you very much for joining us this evening.